Grammy-nominated Larry Hoffman. What's happening, my man?
Jack, how are you, my friend? Thanks
I
for
am
having
well.
me.
No, thank you for being on the show, man. It's a long time coming.
Well, let me say, first of all, thanks for so much for having me as a guest. It's quite an honor, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Congratulations on all your great work on behalf of the blues, and much congratulations for being inducted into the New York Blues Hall of Fame just this month. That's huge recognition and wonderful achievement.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now we're going to get to you.
No, we're going to stay. We're going to stay on you the whole time because that would be more comfortable for me, Jack.
Yeah,
I'm just teasing. Go ahead.
Well, you know, it's, I'm going to tell you the irony of the world and how small the world is. So you've done a whole lot of work. You have a long tenure of work in music and blues, from actually composing to teaching to writing many articles. I was introduced to you through Garland Floyd.
My friend Garland, gee.
Yeah, mover and shaker. He's a mover and shaker boy.
He is that.
Yes. I was sitting in a interview. I was interviewing a New York Blues Hall of Fame legend in itself, and who also was on Alligator Records for some time, Michael Hill. And in the interview, lo and behold, Larry Hoffman comes up. So I guess I want to start with that article and how if it did, and how it changed because you've done a lot of articles, right, based on the blues, based
Correct,
on
yes.
blues people, the heritage, the culture, and everything. You know something? No. As much as I want to start on that article, maybe we should go back a little further and talk about your experience as a musician and what led to that article.
My time with my mom when I was 5.
Well, that could have spawned and inspired some blues too.
That was a wonderful experience, Jack. I'll never forget the plate of cereal she put. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, let's start with the experiences you had that led to articles like that, right? As you
well,
performed.
no, you were going. That was it. I shouldn't have interrupted you. You were going back. Sounded interesting. You were going back earlier than that. To where were you going?
Right, to the experiences you had as a blues musician that led you to begin writing pieces as that. Let's talk about those experiences, because you've been a musician for a long time. Your musicianship and musical experience is your high level, right? But as you were playing blues and you were in these festivals and you knew you were able to interact and meet and talk to a lot of the bluesmen that are celebrated today by so many people posting these pictures. Let's talk about those experiences that led to that
Excuse me.
Article. Please.
Well, thank you for bringing all that up. There's a couple of things that come to mind. The first time I ever played out in public was with a little folk group I had when I was 15, and we opened for Elizabeth Cotten.
Wow.
And and she's just this wonderful lady, and it was unbelievable. And I was 15, so and I just had that first record she did with Folkways or Piedmont, I forget the label right now. But at any rate, I have a long experience as I played the ukulele, then I played the banjo, and I played the tenor guitar, and I was interested in all kinds of music. It's all I ever really cared about my entire life. And so by the time I was playing the guitar, and my brother forced me to go up on stage in Provincetown when I was 19, I was a folk singer. And I was very much into the music of Bob Dylan and a lot of the old country players and Hank Williams and the string band players like the New Lost City Ramblers and and Charlie Poole and the North Carolina Ramblers and all those guys, and a plethora of, Tim Hardin, the great singer-songwriter, and I was just into a whole band of music that I loved, that I loved playing. But I was getting more into the blues, but the blues I loved the blues. I mean, from the first time I heard it, I loved it, and I was almost a scholar from the word go, because the first blues record I ever had was John Hammond. And I said, what is this? And then I read the back of his album cover, and within 2 days I had Robert Johnson's first Columbia record, LP, 1962 probably. And that opened me into this whole incredible new world. And I used to play that record when I'd go to sleep at night, because I heard that Berlitz had a course where you could learn another language by having it played while you went to sleep, and had it. So this was a whole new language to me that was just fascinating and deep. And I think that's the last John Hammond record I ever bought. And by the way, I loved John; he's a wonderful person. And strangely enough, I ended up opening for him about a year and a half after I got that first record.
Wow.
And in a coffee shop in Provincetown. And he's just a wonderful person, a wonderful musician. But I digress, as I always do. But at any rate,
no, because you're not digressing. You're setting the stage for everything. Go ahead.
Okay, so when I got to Provincetown, I loved playing music. By that time I loved Mississippi John Hurt's music, and I was playing some of his tunes that I picked up from the guitar, and from his album, from his Piedmont first record. And I played a whole bunch of different things. When I got to Provincetown, I was with a bunch of other quasi hippie musicians. I remember that word was just coming into being, so they didn't call us that yet. But there was a bunch of people that just were crazy musicians, and all we cared about was just playing music. So a lot of us had dropped out of college and whatever, and were just playing music. And we played at this club called the Blues Bag in Provincetown, Massachusetts, and we weren't getting paid, but we were on stage, and that was fun because none of us had ever been on stage before. So it was like a jam situation, and it was a win-win because we got to play on stage, and the club owner got free music, and people got to listen to music. It was a really beautiful thing. And then all of a sudden he went pro, the club owner, and he told everybody that they were not welcome to play there anymore except for me. Wow. And he offered me a job to be the house folk singer, and he would pay me to open for all these incredible folk and blues people, including John Hammond and Jim Queston Jug Band and Tom Rush, and you name it, they were there. And I got to open for them. But the most significant person was Skip James.
Wow.
And yeah, I opened for him, and we got to be really good buddies. And he asked me to teach him a song I was playing. It was called Sportin' Life, that I learned from a Lovin' Spoonful record, but was actually a Brownie McGhee song. But I didn't know that then. That's where the Spoonful got it, I'm sure. Anyway, I taught it to Skip, although I was reluctant. I said, Skip, I can't teach you a song. That's wrong, man. I'm a 19-year-old kid. I can't be teaching Skip James any songs.
Right.
And he said, no, I really want to learn it. I want to learn it. So I taught it to him, and he went right to the piano and started playing it.
Wow.
And if anybody listening has not heard Skip James play piano, they ought to, because it's really fantastic.
He's serious.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like guitar on piano. It's crazy and exciting. But anyway, we played that song as a duet together every night. And I would do my set, and then I'd invite Skip to come up, and we'd play that song together. And then he would do his set, and then that would be, I think that happened twice a night for a week or two. And then he invited me to come to Newport, but just as a friend. You know, he said, why don't you come to Newport and hear me?
Explain to the audience what Newport is. What's the significance of this Newport event?
Well, Newport, I forget what the first festival was. I believe it was a jazz festival back in the 50s. And they had a problem where they knocked down the fences and during some raucous thing, and then they stopped it for a number of years. And at some point, it morphed into a folk festival as well. And they had all the great, folk artists, including Bob Dylan, and Lomax was involved, and Pete Seeger was involved, and they were kind of the fathers of the festival in a way. I believe George Wein was the guy who first started it, but I'm not sure. And then to go out on the limb again, say something I'm not sure of, I think he started the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival also, but he's a tremendous American festival person. Anyway, when I got to Newport, I went back, I tracked him down and I went backstage, and me and my then girlfriend were the only two white people back there. And Skip came over to me and said, "Well, you two look very familiar and very nice." I'll never forget that. Never forget those words. That's exactly what he said. And so we were talking for a while. Meanwhile, he'd introduce me. He'd say, "Son, come over. Bucka, come over." And he was introducing me to all the great bluesmen that were playing. Wow. And I've had trouble remembering what year. I'm guessing 1966.
Okay.
I can't know. Somebody once told me if you remember the exact year in the 60s, you weren't really living it there.
That's funny, because that's what I say about the 80s. If you remember it, you wasn't there.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was true in the 60s, believe me. But anyway, so then Skip said, "Look," he said, "when I finish my set, I want to call you up and do that duet that we were doing at the club. And then I want you to do a set of your own." And I was stunned, because I had no idea. Exactly. But I had no idea that he would ask me to do that. I just thought, we were kind of buddies then. And I thought he just wanted to say hi to me and invite me to come to Newport to hear him and all that. I had no idea. And at that moment, Bucka White turned around and shot a look at me I will never forget. And Bucka had never heard me or anything. But just the idea of some white guy getting on stage, some white kid getting on stage to share their stage, was something that he could not abide. And that look was really something. Anyway, I got it. I got what Bucka meant. And all of a sudden, I knew what blues was, and realized that no matter how well I could play it and sing it, if in fact I could play it and sing it that well, it didn't matter, because I could never be that music. As I looked at Son House and Bucka White and Skip James, and those guys a lot of them just come up from the South. And this was a brand new white audience for them at that time. So that kind of set the stage for the rest of my career. Like, I decided, I can play blues music as part of my folk repertoire, but I can never call myself a blues man per se. And neither should any other white guy.
Wow.
Which, put me at odds with thousands of people, but that's okay.
Well, has it?
Pardon?
I said, has it? I'm sorry, I was making a joke. You said it put you at odds with thousands of people. I was like, has it?
Well, it did. And I think it probably still has. And so, at any rate, and I tell you the truth, I never liked being on stage either that much. I love playing music, and I love communicating with people doing my music. But, as far as telling jokes or like warming up to the audience, or, I never was into that. I never cared about it. Music is very serious to me. So when I got on stage, I was just all about the music, but club owners didn't get it. But they still hired me. So, it was a crazy thing, but I ended up that I really didn't. Here's some breaking news for Jack. When I told Skip, I said, Skip, I've been doing this for a while, and I have to make a confession to you. I'm just not into it some nights. I mean, I go up there, and I know I got to play. It's my job, and I love music, and I love playing, but some nights I just don't have it. But I do it anyway. And Skip looked at me and said, "What's the difference?" He said, "I'm like that most of the time. You just get up there and do it." And that's the great Skip Jam. That just blew my mind, entirely. It still blows my mind when I think about it. I mean, anyway, so.
Let me ask you a question based on that piece of inspiration that he's given you, because I can say for myself that sometimes I'm like, I just really don't feel like getting up here, and
Exactly.
whether it's on the radio or it's, I'm getting up to holler some blues, and I'm sure a lot of performers feels that way, but it was it a revelation at that point that this living legend is really just a human being like the rest of us, is my question.
Yes, yes. He was not supposed to feel that. He was supposed to be up there bringing the wealth of black culture to him in a poignant, inspirational moment. Every single second he was there. And every single second he was off stage, too. I mean, he was like a god, like an icon, a complete icon. He wasn't supposed to, as you said so eloquently just then, you know, he wasn't supposed to be a human like me.
Wow. So let me, just to step to the side from your story for 1 second. Do you think what we just said in regards to these living legends, so to speak, are not regarded or thought of as a human like me? Do you think that's also a reason why the story of the blues and the actual music of the blues, a lot of people, especially non-black people, have issue with connecting those two? Because, like, well, if we address or acknowledge this part of it, then he's no longer this music god or this blues legend, but he's actually a person that, on most occasions, got the worst of the stick. Like, it's more of an identify or acknowledgement of something that people don't want to put together.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think that happens in other fields too. I mean, like, I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but Aaron Judge,
right?
You know I'm talking about. I mean, he's a rookie with the Yankees that hit 52 home runs this year, and
I'll put it to you this way. My wife and children and I were at the game when he broke the record.
Oh my God! Whew.
Yes.
Well, then, if you happened to see him at the supermarket, would you not be in awe of him?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think it happens in different fields as well, where, you know, in sports and in any field where you have the person like on stage or in front. But if you're deeply connected to that field, you know, then you expect this guy to be more than he could possibly be, and more than he would want to be. I mean, Skip was just, you know, a guy. I mean, he was just taking care of his health at that point.
Right, because they were older gentlemen. Right. So now,
also he was dealing with cancer. So.
Right. So the look that Booker White gave you, you pretty much expressed what you received from it. You know, did you ever speak to him? Did you ever say, "Hey, man, I get it"?
Oh, no. No, in the words of, there was a gentleman on the Real Blues Forum that passed away, unfortunately, named Talbot. Oh, God, I'm going to forget his name now. But he was involved with the Mississippi John Hurt record and Piedmont Records back in the day. And we kind of hooked up, like, online, talking about, you know, back in the day and stuff like that. And he was an older gentleman than I. But when I told that story, when I wrote that story as a comment online, Talbot came online and or remarked that, yeah, Bucket could be intimidating, because he knew him too. So he had, you know, he was a big burly guy,
right?
And he was intimidating, and you know, you could tell. I knew what he meant, and it was a great thing that happened to me, really, because it was the truth. I learned the truth from the fount.
Well, so can we talk about that for a moment?
Sure.
Because you said you learned the truth from the fountain, and it was a great thing that happened to you. Now, somebody, another very good, probably I would go as far as saying great. He probably wouldn't say he's great yet, but a great musician reached out to me and said something similar to what you said, based on thanking me for I guess helping encourage him to seek the truth, and it changed his life as a musician. Right?
Wow.
What? Yeah. So you're kind of saying that. Why are you grateful? What, besides the fact, okay, and I want to say this, besides the fact that it's okay, well, as a white man, I can't get up here and call myself, but we get that. Besides that, why was that? What did you take from it that made it such a unique and a good experience to set the tone for all of the great works that came after?
Oh, well, that's really kind of you to say. Well, first of all, what it taught me was the meaning of the blues, quite simply.
Mm.
I mean, you know, what it was, really what that blues was. I mean, I loved the music and I loved playing it, but the weight of the culture, the whole weight of that culture was in that look.
Mm.
Like, you're not this. You will never be this. And, you know, we've struggled to be this. We didn't ask for it, but this is our struggle. This is our music. And, you know, you can read that in a book and you can hear it in a movie or whatever, but, you know, I saw it. I saw it in Bucka's look. And,
firsthand, right?
Firsthand, and that was I'm grateful for that experience, and I learned that about the blues, and eventually I was able to say that in that article.
So let's talk about this article, because based on, and I'm connecting this to Michael Hill, which that podcast will be up soon. You wrote a very, at the time, would be considered radical article, and he responded to it and became a guest writer, so to speak, to your article series. Let's talk about that. What was the basis of the article?
Well, first of all, it was published as a guest editorial in Guitar Player magazine in August 1990, and the great writer, jazz and blues historian, actually Jas Obrecht, was then the editor of Guitar Player. So he had a strong blues background, which I didn't know about. At any rate, the article. See if I can. I'm not a good one for short answers, as you already know.
That's okay. We got time.
Okay.
And when we run out of time, I'll let you know.
Okay. I have great divergent taste in music, and I got somewhere along the line after this experience, and not because of it, or maybe it contributed to it, but I fell in love with jazz music. And I ended up studying with the teacher of John Coltrane, Benny Golson, Jim Hall, Pat Martino, and the list goes on. This is a jazz genius teacher. And any professional jazz musician,
listen to the people he spawned.
Exactly. His name is Dennis Sandoli. He's one of the most underrated people in jazz. But anyway, he is mentioned in Coltrane's biography and in a lot of other places. But at any rate, I fell into his studio by virtue of another musician I met, black musician by the name of Rufus Harley, if you're familiar with him. Mm-hmm. He was a jazz bagpipe player, but he also played tenor sax, I believe, and flute. He toured with Sonny Rollins during the summers, and he was a student of Dennis's, and he brought me up to Dennis. But anyway,
okay.
Okay, so halfway through, after 5 or 6 years with Dennis, I realized that jazz was black music at its core as well. If not as much as blues, because jazz has a certain cerebral quality that is not culturally related, if you know what I'm talking about.
A certain sophisticatedness that could make it more, I would say, composition friendly than the blues, right?
Right. Well, it's not composition necessarily, but yeah, it's a more musically sophisticated art, which makes it admissible for anybody that can get that. But to me, it still was black music at its heart.
Right.
And when I learned that, I told that to Dennis, and he just sheepishly shook his head. Yes, you know. But around that time, I fell in love with Brahms' Fourth Symphony. Don't ask me how or why, because I really don't remember the first time I heard it. But as soon as I heard it, it changed my life. That was another life-changing experience, and I realized, well, you know, I'm a composer anyway. And then I started to study music theory on my own, and took, you know, I sought out a piano teacher and all this stuff while I was still studying with Dennis. And then I eventually started studying private composition and theory with these people, and one of them convinced me to go to the conservatory. Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, which is now part of Hopkins. And then I became completely engrossed with studying classical music, from medieval music to Renaissance to Baroque to classical to Romantic to, post-Romantic to 12-tone, the whole thing. And I started teaching there after a year. I went there at 29. They didn't know what to make of me, and they weren't going to let me in until I placed into the fourth year with a theory test. And then they really didn't know what to make me. So the head of the composition department said, "I'll take him." And so it was Robert Hall Lewis, a tremendous teacher, and he took me under his wing. And after a year of being a special student, they hired me as a teacher. So, and they didn't even know about my jazz or blues background and all that. I kept that quiet because I wanted to be thought of as a composer. I wanted to make my bones as a composer, and not have a musical background behind me that they knew of. But anyway, as it turns out, I started the first jazz department they ever had. That was later. But after years of being involved in the conservatory, and I finally got my master's, and they offered me a chance to get my doctorate there, and I turned that down because my teacher said I had pretty much what I needed to be a composer, and I didn't want to get into the establishment.
Right. So now, this is from your hippie days, right?
No. They were
I'm teasing. Go ahead.
Yeah, the only hippie there was my very good late friend Michael Hedges, who's a fabulous new age guitar player. I mean, so talented, and he was at Peabody with me. But he was a retro guy. He was tremendously talented, but he was a retro guy, and his girlfriend too, with tie dye shirts, and they were like hippies in the late '80s. Anyway, but no, that was way past then. I mean, for me, I was totally involved with classical music, and I mean, you may not have known that to look at me, but I didn't look like a hippie either. But the point is that after I got out of the conservatory thing, I started to open up again and revisit blues. Okay, so my then girlfriend was a travel agent. She was taking me to Florida for some God knows reason, probably because we get there for free and all that. But anyway, during there, I brought with me, I knew I'd be bored, so I brought with me all my blues tapes just to reacquaint myself. So I brought all my favorite, Robert Johnson's Son House and Little Walter and Albert King and B.B. King and Fred, the whole thing, Sonny Boy and all that, because I just wanted to hear that stuff again. And because I hadn't had a chance to listen to it for a while. I just had it back burner, all that stuff, and jazz. Right. And then I was listening to Albert King, and it finally hit me. That's why white people can't play this. The grit, the bends that Albert gets. The incredible microtonal, to use a word, music that he plays. It's a cultural thing. It's not. It's nothing you can read. It's nothing you can imitate really well. It's black music. No wonder white people can't do it. And that just struck me. I cannot tell you what that did to me. It was like, wow, this is the answer. This is really why. Well, coincidentally, I was at this gig. I just had to go because it was called Legends of the Blues. And they had Pinetop Perkins, Snooky Pryor, and I'll think of the third guy, Hubert Sumlin, Snooky Pryor, and Pinetop Perkins. And then this horrible white band. I don't really want to mention their name. I'd love to, but probably wouldn't be nice to do. But anyway, and they were playing at this club downtown, so I had to go see them because I didn't know Hubert or Pinetop or those guys, but I idolized them. I mean, I listened to their music. So I went down there, and I was grossed out by how this arrogant white band treated these three giants of blues. I mean, these guys, this was like 1989 or something. They were not old men at this time. I mean, they were seniors, but they were still playing. And they treated them like they were old, battered up statues. Wow. And they brought them out just for a couple songs during the set, and they paraded them on stage. It was really disrespectful, and so, but actually, it did give me a chance to hang out with Hubert Sumlin for the night. That was fun. And
I'm sure that was.
Yeah, me and Hubert were hanging out making fun of the band. Like, I'd be saying to Hubert, he said, nothing there that any white guy couldn't do worse. And Hubert
my goodness.
burst out laughing, and he said, "You terrible, man!" And we had a great time. But it just really irked me, and they were part of the article as an example, because you got to remember that this was at a time when Stevie Ray Vaughan, the Thunderbirds, and Eric Clapton were on fire. They were the blues to America,
right?
And it was appalling to me. I mean, you had Albert Collins opening for these people. You had blues greats that were second to these people. It was just sickening. And that's when I wrote the article, and I used this band and that experience as part of the article. Excuse me. So I sent it to Downbeat magazine. Because my girlfriend said, you ought to get this published. And I said, well, I'm not a writer. I don't want to publish this. And then I read it to my brother, and anybody I read it to said, you should get this published. So I said, well, what the hell? I'll send it around to see what happens. So Downbeat said, quote, one of their most prestigious writers said, my editor wouldn't touch us with a 10-foot pole.
Wow.
I thought that was interesting. I ended up sitting next to him years later in the VIP section of the Chicago Blues Festival. And I said, hey, man, remember, you're the guy that just after I got my Grammy nomination for writing about blues, I said, you're the one that turned down my first article. And it was funny. We shook hands and all that, But anyway, guitar player accepted it. And like I said, Jazz Obrecht is the one that, made it a guest editorial because he probably felt the same way. And then Living Blues wanted to publish it, but I had already promised it to Guitar Player. And basically the article just says at its heart, I think they extracted one sentence. The white player could only at best be a expressive copyist and could in no way extend the lifeblood of the blues. And immediately after that, I heard that, white players were faxing that article across the country and back. They were outraged. And when I finally met Jazz at a King Biscuit Festival, he looked at me when we first met and said, Larry, I thought you'd been assassinated by now.
Wow.
Because it had received more mail than any other article in that magazine I'd ever received. And 95% of it was negative hate mail against me and what I said.
So now,
and then
you gave us
Michael Hill to come. But go ahead.
No. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue that.
Well, Michael Hill, who I knew of only as an alligator artist, which didn't distinguish him in my view at that time. But because his band was not really a blues band at that time, as I remember. Blues Mob, it was called, or something like that. But he did an article in support of another guest editorial that was in support of what I said. And that was heartening. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I believe it was in support of it. But the crazy thing was, when I met him at a Chicago Blues Festival, Michael Hill, I said, hey, man, we were on the same page. But then he looked at me like he didn't talk at all to me.
Oh, wow.
That was the craziest. I thought we were, saying, yeah, man, that was cool. No, he didn't say a word to me. Maybe he wasn't sure what I was talking about. Or he didn't want to be seen being my friend. That could have been it, too, but you never know.
Wow. Well, now you shared with us, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, then I want to get into the projects that you have right now, because they're very interested in how you are composing the blues. But prior to doing that, you're welcome. Prior to doing that, I want, you told us the line that was extracted. Could you just give us a brief summary of the actual article? I believe people have an idea, but it would just be good to give a summary of what this article was actually about. Well,
I start out by saying, I can't recall the whole thing exactly, but I set the stage by saying that, the riding champions of the blues right now are Stevie Ray Vaughan, Eric Clapton, the Thunderbirds, and all that. But if that's true, what about the archetypes that are still living, breathing bluesmen like Robert Lockwood, and I list a bunch of them, that are really bluesmen? Where do they fit in? They're being squeezed out by these white interlopers, really, that are cashing in, taking all the money, all the acclaim, and the title of bluesman, reducing the great ones to opening acts. And it's just, it's false, it's unreal, it's unfair, and it's poisonous to the culture. And I said that, you know, most of the blues societies around the country are white, primarily. The record companies are run by white people. The blues magazines, for the most part, a lot of them are run by white people. I mean, it's white machinery, as my friend, the late Jerry Ricks, used to call it. Bluesman Jerry Ricks said it was, you know, the white machinery that's running everything. And like Robert Lockwood told me, the wrong peoples are running it.
Right.
That was
it was Robert Lockwood you spent time with and wrote that piece about, correct?
Right. I lived for a week with Robert in Cleveland and wrote the cover story for Living Blues. That was largely in his words. I'm so proud of that article because Robert was just such a incredible talent, and he lived through the entire history of the blues. I mean, his stepfather was Robert Johnson, and he lived all the way up through B.B. King and everybody else. I mean, he was the blues, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we really hit it off.
That's groovy. So now, you have a tremendous amount of work. I don't know if we can get to everything in these last several minutes.
You promised me we'd get to everything, Jack.
the music theory lessons, the educated, the books you've written producing for greats like Corey Harris, and your own compositions that, well, you know what? Please, you explain to us your compositions, the thought behind it, and what you wish the people to get from it.
Okay. First of all, I've never written a book per se. The closest I've come is written for my box set I did for the Smithsonian Mean Old World. I got Grammy nominated for my notes to that, which were about a 90-page booklet.
Okay.
But anyway, I've had some book offers, but I didn't want to bury myself in a book because I bury myself in my music, which is bad enough. Anyway, at some point, I came to the realization that no one had ever successfully, in my view, put blues as part of American, quote, serious, unquote, music. I mean, all great music is serious. But right. Classical music, which is not a good term either. Art music. There's no really good term for it. And I wanted to do that. That was my mission, to take the blues essence, and put it, I had a great term for that earlier today when I was thinking about it, because I don't like the word we talked about that before, fusion, because that reminds me of fusion.
Right, that's why
jazz.
I chose not to use it.
Yeah, which is another pet peeve of mine. Don't get me into that. But it's an integration, which is an interesting word to use for that. I integrate blues essence as much as I can into my own contemporary classical voice that I've developed while actually at Peabody and beyond. And my first piece, when I finished my master's and I got on my own, the first piece I composed was a string quartet number 1, The Blues. And it's my most successful piece. It's been performed a couple times in Europe and was premiered at the Smithsonian Chamber of Music concert series, and performed in Chicago a couple times, and in Baltimore, and in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. It's been performed a lot of places throughout the country. And that piece, and by the way, there's, if anybody wants to get on my website, they can see a performance of that piece, and also an interview by Barry Dolan's, who's a wonderful guy and a great friend who founded the Chicago Blues Festival, in his series Talk About the Blues in Chicago. But anyway, that piece, if you will listen to it, just puts the blues out there. No excuses. You know what I mean? It's right out there, and then combines it with atonal music, which your audience may not be that aware of, and that it's a different side of the universe. But
right. Well, some are. So first of all, let's tell them the website, even though it's in the description of today's broadcast. But let's tell them the website so they can go find this.
www.LarryHoffmanmusic.com.
Okay, you will find that under the My Music,
and also,
right?
You can hear my music also, and I have a YouTube channel, and I don't know how to get to it exactly. If you just do Larry Hoffman Music YouTube, you'll probably come up with it. I have about 14 YouTubes that I made of pieces. But it put me in a weird situation where many classical players look down on the blues because, it's a low class, quote unquote, music. And a lot of blues people look down on classical music because, these guys just read, they have no heart and soul, and I'm in the middle saying, wait a minute, both of you are crazy. None of that's true.
Right. And you're the only one doing this right now.
Well, I don't really know. I'm not in touch with it. I haven't heard. Anytime I hear something like that, I try to listen to it, and no one's doing it quite the way I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Like no one is taking a really serious shot at it like I am, that I have come across.
Would you say there's some inspiration from a W.C. Handy in what you're doing? Because that's kind of his what he became famous for, putting blues, so to speak, in orchestrated symphonies. No,
I don't think he wrote symphonies, but. And actually, Sam Charters came to interview me. I can't even believe those words just came out of my mouth, but it's true. And because you know what I mean, the Sam Charters. Oh my God! So anyway,
yes.
And he came to interview me because he was in love with my blues for harp, oboe, and cello, and he loved the way I was putting blues in classical music. He wanted to produce some of my music, actually. And I say that not only to brag, but there was another reason why I was saying that.
In regards to
Charters,
go ahead.
Yeah, Charters wanted me to say that I was influenced by Gershwin, just like you wanted me to be influenced by W.C. Handy. It reminded me of that, and I wasn't.
Okay, well, I don't necessarily want you to wait. I don't necessarily want you to be influenced by Handy. I was asking if there was any Handy inspiration there.
Right, it makes sense that you would say that, and it made great sense to me that Charters said that about Gershwin, but I felt like I was disappointing him by saying, well, no, not really, because, I love Gershwin, and, Handy I haven't listened to much, but I always found him to be very interesting. I never really spent that much time with his music. Gershwin, I love Gershwin. What a wonderful musician. But he still is not a serious composer, quote unquote. My main inspiration for this was Bela Bartok, who you may or may not know much about. But he was a Hungarian composer that was a folklorist of Hungarian folk music, and a great pianist. And a lot of his music is informed by the music of Hungary, the folk music, the peasant music of Hungary. He would go out into the fields and talk to the peasants, and they were real peasants there, right? Poor people living in the fields, farming and stuff like that. And he would copy down their songs and incorporate them in his music and his melodies and scales and stuff like that. And that was a tremendous influence to me. And also a Czechoslovakian composer by the name of Leo Janáček. And his thing was, he was all about the music of the people of Czechoslovakia. And a lot of his music was to emulate the speech patterns of the Czechoslovakians. So the rhythms it's fascinating, man. You would really, you'd really get blown away by that because, and especially, well, I can see scores. So, when I look at his music, the rhythms are like unbelievably strange, because they're made to imitate Czechoslovakian, folk speech, actual speech. And that's really the two main inspirations to me. But, other than Albert King, B.B. King, Freddie King, Little Walter, Son House, and, all the great bluesmen that I idolize.
But that's, I mean,
And
that's
of course,
really deep.
Brahms, Mozart, and Bach. They are the greatest musical inspirations of my life. I mean, Bach, I think, is the greatest musicians that ever breathed air. So
that's serious business.
oh man, it doesn't get not to mention Eric Dolphy, another one of my heroes. So I've had a lot of tremendous musical influences that, always make me feel always like a rookie.
Well, let me ask you this: as we're heading towards the closing line, what influenced you to say, okay, you know what? I love how this group of musicians attacked or approached music. I love how these musicians play. I'm not one of these
Which musicians are you talking about? Oh,
okay,
you mean the blues guys?
Right. So it's like, yeah. So I'm talking about both the those that inspired you. You like their approach, which I understand fully why you like their approach to music, because from what I received, they are fully and immersed in the representation of their people through the folk language, but they're putting it into musical language. That's deep, and I really love stuff like that. So these group of your influences, you love their approach to music. I hate to use this word, but for lack of a better word, those you idolize in blues, you love how they play music.
That's not based a bad word. That's absolutely true. Okay. Idolizing them.
Yeah. Well, so now, what was the thought process, or what was it? Besides the fact in your earlier life lessons, you said, "Well, you know what? Okay, I totally get the blues and why I'm not a bluesman." Besides that, what was it that sparked you to say, "I have to take my inspiration and the music that I love and make this kind of music that you're making now, blues classical, if you wish"?
Okay. One reason is because it had never been done before, to my knowledge, and to the knowledge of some people that have studied that are expert, like the
that studies your music.
Greatly. Well, but no, they've made a study of blues classical music. Other people that have tried it for a long time, of that area. One of them is Greg Johnson, the curator of the blues archive at the University of Mississippi, and he gave me a great compliment on my music. And I've had other people that have seen a lot of music that has tried to do what I'm doing, and I say this with all humility, Jack, because how humble I am, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. So I'm bowing right now. Okay. And I've been told that I was the best at it that they had ever seen. So, and then Sam Charters, he had probably heard everything, thought that way about me. And Paul Oliver had nice things to say also. And so I've had this from people who I really respect, who didn't have to say anything. But they offered their comment. And Bill Ferris, who teaches my music, is part of his teaching at the University of North Carolina, and did that when he was at the University of Mississippi in his blues classes. I was like listening, required listening to see how blues was being used in classical music. So people like that have had a big influence on me to keep going. And also I've been recorded by some world-class classical musicians like John Mack, the great oboe player. Recorded my blues for harp, oboe, and cello with the great harpist Yolanda Condonazes. I mean, that's like top of the top in classical music. That's like having Robert Johnson play one of your songs or something. Or, I mean,
the Sun House or Muddy Water.
Exactly. So all that came into play, but mostly, Jack, just to say that the authentic language is dying out, and
absolutely.
I feel that I have been touched by that authentic language in different ways. in very authentic ways, by knowing these people, by being with them, by producing their records, by playing music with them. I played music with Sonny Terry and Robert Lockwood, and in the studio with I think it was Homesick James or Willie Johnson, one of the two. I played with a lot of those guys, Jerry Ricks, all those guys. I've touched them in a lot of ways, and I've absorbed from them in a lot of ways. And I also have a legitimate jazz education and classical education, and I think that's a rare combination.
Well, it is.
And so that made me feel like I am perhaps the best qualified to do this, if it's possible to do it.
Understood.
You see what I'm saying?
And that not to mention you have a deep passion for the composition of music, right?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. That's true. I wrote my first song when I was 11 on a ukulele, and it was called "I Think I'll Run Away Today." I think I'll run out of town. I tried that a number of times, running away. That is, but so I could improvise on the piano when I was a little kid and all the time and stuff. So I always had creating music was always something that I had a drive to do. And as many times as I've wanted to give it up, I just can't. I just keep driven to keep doing it. So, but really, Bartok really such an inspiration, man. I'm telling you, they didn't even let him. I mean, he was one of the most important composers of the 20th century, and they did not let him teach composition at Juilliard.
Really?
Yeah, they let him teach piano because he was a great pianist. But they thought, his stuff was too crazy or something. They didn't teach. So, it was not an easy road for him, even though he had some important champions. It was not an easy road for him either, because it's not a usual thing to do. And people put the blues in classical music as like a gimmick sometimes.
Right.
Which is really awful, because they don't see the seriousness and the power in the blues. And also, just to add one other thing to it, I would have done the same thing with jazz, except it's been done with jazz 100 times, and it's been done well. Gunther Schuller did it pretty well with things, and Maurice Ravel did some wonderful jazz incorporations, and this early in the 20s with Michaud. So jazz has been exploited in a lot of ways. So there was no need for me to step into that. But blues has been neglected in that way, and so I wanted to be the one to do it. And so that's what I've been spending all these years on. And I also did one dedicated to old-timey music, which I wish sometime you'll get to hear. It's a woodwind quintet called Old Time Music.
Well, isn't that on your website?
I can't remember. It's a YouTube. It's on my YouTube, so I can't remember if I posted that on my website or not.
Because
if you don't have it,
Wind Quintet.
I'll send it to you.
Is it 10, 11, and 12 is Wind Quintet? One is the blues.
Yeah, but that's not it though. That was dedicated to the blues. That's all about blues. But I did another one more recently.
Ragtime?
It's not ragtime. It's old time music, like string band stuff. String band stuff for Woodwind Quintet. And I had a great compliment from somebody who's a Grammy-winning music producer also to that piece. But anyway, I'd like you to hear that piece because I know you love that kind of music too.
I absolutely do. We're about to go off the live broadcast, but this will be recorded, and this will be the last question before we wrap. And this comes from Brock Lightning. I have a question that connects to the question. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, Brock. Please tell me if I'm reading this correctly. Where the black play. Do you want to call in briefly to ask this question, Brock? You let me know because I'm not clear what you're asking. And are you asking this to me or to Larry? Okay, we'll have to do that at another time. Okay, so we're going off there.
You mean there's really people listening to this, Jack?
I'm surprised too. No, absolutely, they are.
No, you do a great thing. I just can't imagine people want to hear me talk about this stuff.
Well, they do. You'll be surprised how people really want the truth of culture, American history, and how it created and evolutionized the expression of all of our tribes. But I want to thank you for being on the show.
So thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I do appreciate it. But you can tell people if they get in touch with you, if they're interested, I have a Facebook page called Larry Hoffman Music. And if they want to get in there and ask me a question or whatever, or share their thoughts on what I'm doing or whatever, tell them to please do that.
Please, you just told them. I hope you all heard that.
Oh,
okay.
Right.
And I will. The link to Larry's website is in the description box. He has a Facebook page, Larry Hoffman Music. Check that out. I thank you again, brother, for joining me. And this is not the last time because you have to come back. There's more we need to talk about.
Great. And thank you again, Jack. It's been a pleasure. It's always great to talk to you. And congratulations on all your great work for the blues.
Thank you, sir. You all have been tuned into Jack Dapper Blues Heritage Radio. You know what's going on. We will be back with you 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. I will talk to you then. But if you're on social media, you might see me because I got stuff to post. Take care, everyone.